Imagine a day where children are guided and nurtured in a way that honors their unique humanness. A day where, instead of being expected to change in order to fit in, children can be met right where they're at. Welcome to Where They're Planted, a podcast for parents and care providers of unique children. Caring for a child with a developmental, emotional, or behavior challenge, a neurodiverse brain, or difficult early life experiences can be confusing and exhausting. On this podcast, we'll help your child flourish and strengthen their roots by helping you not only understand them, but also gain the skills to help them bloom where they're planted. We'll use brain science, nervous system tools, collaborative strategy sessions, and a deep understanding of the developmental process to create a fertile environment around your child in order to nurture their growth. I am your host, Jen Bluske, an occupational therapist with over 25 years of experience and a parent coach. My most closely held title, however, is that of a single mom of 2 thriving adopted kids, so I have walked this walk. I am truly excited to share, teach, and dive into these important topics on each episode. Welcome back to Where They're Planted. Today is a very special episode. If you've been following this podcast for some time now, you know that we are talking about how to support our kids right where they're at. We are giving perspective on brain development and regulation, ways to support our kids to be the best versions of themselves, and how to, at the same time, hold close relationships with them. We know that connection is key in parent-child relationships, but how do we know what our kids are really thinking? How do we gain a deeper understanding of their responses and maybe the meaning under the dirty look or the slammed door or the long circular conversation about whatever's on their mind at the moment? Today, we are going to open a little window into the minds of our kids as we try on some of these tools and strategies. Today, I have with me my daughter, Anna. Being raised by a mom who is an OT and studies attachment and regulation for a living isn't always easy. Real life, including disruptions and traumas and periods of intense stress, happens to us all, and our family has not been immune from these times. I hope that today we can help you get a glimpse into how your desire to meet your child right where they're planted plays out in childhood and in relationship as your kids move into adulthood. Hello, Anna.
Hi.
So I've referenced my kids somewhat often in the podcast. So why don't we just start? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm 16 years old. I just finished my junior year of high school. I have loved horses my whole life. I've owned 2 now. Thank you, Mom. And I currently still have 1.
All right. So Anna and I have talked about this a little bit, and actually Anna asked to be on the podcast to give her perspective, and I'm really excited to see what happens in this conversation. So Anna, our relationship probably hasn't always been the easiest one. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I really think about sort of why, from my perspective, one of the reasons is that our nervous system, so my nervous system and then your nervous system, needs different things. And so to review nervous system, so it's how our brain uses our sensory systems, our vision, our movement, our hearing, our interoception in order to take in information and then do something with it. And so let's start there and talking about sort of like how our nervous systems sort of bounce off each other in your childhood and then like kind of now. So tell me about, what do you know, Anna, that you need in your nervous system?
I know that I need a lot of support. I regulate the best if it's co-regulated. I struggle really hard to self-regulate.
Tell me what that means for you.
Well,
so obviously you're using OT language because you were raised by an OT mama. And so what does co-regulation mean for you?
It means that I need another person to help me regulate and like come back down into my own head. So typically I use friends or I use my mom, and it's a lot easier for me because I'm very anxious that when I try and regulate myself, that it just kind of goes in circles and I can't really get myself back into where I need to be.
And so let's give an example of this. I'm just going to be intentionally really vague. If there's like a fight with a friend or something like that, right? Because you're a teenager, or when you were younger, it might be, I said no to ice cream, and you might feel really upset. And then if you're left to yourself, so if I'm like, you need to go to your room and work it out, are you able to calm down and be okay in those moments?
It generally, I would say, took a while. I mean, I would have a tantrum. Well, when I was a kid, I'd have tantrum by myself, and then like eventually I'd just tire myself out and call that a day. But I'd say more so now today, it would be just going like to my room and just being by myself for a while and just like decompressing before I can then think rationally and reasonably.
And when things are really, really bad, are you able to think rationally and reasonably?
Typically, I mean, it's really a big scale. I mean, it would take a hot minute just because depending on the severity of the situation and the contents of it, it would really affect how I would be able to regulate and like how long it would take and what I would need during that time.
And so what I see as your mom is that when those things happen, it kind of like flavors the rest of your day.
Yeah.
So like if I have to say no to something or something happens with a friend, you might be able to move on with your day, but you're sort of like edgy or grouchy or short, or, you know, you can tell you're not sort of in a calm state for a period of the day. Now, let's talk about what happens when I'm able to be there. Like when you were a kid, when I was able to be there, or when I'm able to co-regulate you. What do people do for you that co-regulates you?
I just think it's the presence of another person. And then for me personally, talking to another person, like about the situation, as I'm talking, I'll kind of point out to myself, like, oh, okay, that was, you know, overreacting, or that was me, or that was the other person, or like, okay, I overreacted and this was immature of, you know, whoever. And just kind of like I end up walking myself through it when I'm able to talk to someone else about it. And then also it's just really helpful for me to have another person's opinion and advice about a situation, I'd say.
And so knowing that our nervous systems are pretty different and you need closeness and a lot of co-regulation, and I sometimes need space, right? I sometimes need like quiet, and I sometimes need just to zone out, or I need to finish whatever I'm doing because I'll have a stressful work event, and that just happened last night, and I'll have to finish it. Like, what happens for you?
I wouldn't say like a complete shutdown, but I guess I kind of in the moment just like whatever it was that I was upset about, I just kind of have to live with. And it's like the feelings that I'll have around the situation don't go away. And I kind of just hold on to it and typically wait for another time to be able to like talk about it. I mean, depending on the severity of the situation, sometimes it'll just go away and I'll be like, okay, whatever. But typically for me, it's like, then I carry it with me until the next time. I'd kind of pack that on to everything else.
So. Let's keep talking about now, and then I want to talk about when you were a little more. And what's useful that I can do, or what's maybe not useful when I can't, like when my nervous system isn't okay. So one thing that I've started to do when I can't be super regulated, and one thing you've started asking, and this has taken us 16 years to figure out, is I'm able to say, you know what, I'm super stressed right now. Can I talk to you tonight?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and, like giving a set time to.
Yeah. And so sometimes when I'm not able, we've come up with a plan that I just tell you how I'm feeling. Not like put it on you, but just like, hey, I'm super stressed. I can't do it right now. How about tomorrow? Yeah. And then what does that do for you?
I'd say it makes me like, it helps me like calm down a little bit and know that, okay, in like set amount of time or during like this set time, like, okay, I'll be able to talk about it then. And then it also sometimes just having it sit with me, like instead of like, oh my God, this just happened and like I need to talk about it right now. Like, well, it's high and it's like, having that time to sit with it too for a little bit can de-escalate it, I'd say. And it also makes me know that it's not necessarily like, it's not me, I'm not too much. It's just like whatever situation it was happening in your life, your energy needs to go on that. And it's not like, it's you, not me kind of situation. So, yeah.
And really, I mean, we talk about in the podcast, this is called distress tolerance. So it's the ability to hold distress in your body. And as opposed to me being like, it's not that big of a deal, just deal with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you can know that you're going to get your need met, but just maybe not right now, helps build that distress tolerance. So let's talk about when you were little. Like you're like, I don't know, like between like 5 and 7 maybe? And what that was like with your nervous system that just has a lot of intensity in it and needs that. Do you remember at all, Anna, what I used to do?
Star.
The star.
I remember
You
that.
do remember the star. So the star is a reflex that is super calming. And so sometimes I would actually just go straight to sensory-based strategies to help calm you down. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about when you were crying or screaming or yelling or whatever? I still remember that period of time at bedtime where you would every single night for, I don't know, like 2 months. And I don't know if you remember that. And I don't know if you remember why it would happen or what it felt like in your body.
I remember a lot of it for me stemmed from, or I think at least, anyways, I don't remember when I was 5 and 7, but I remember feeling like, when the other sibling was having their own outburst, like all the attention went on them. And then I felt very attention neglected, but I like picked up on, okay, if, they're getting all the attention by doing this. So now I'm going to start implementing that so I can have the attention that I am feeling neglected from. But I'd say also, I mean, it just took a lot of like screaming and whatnot and then figuring it out on our own. Like if you just like sat there with us and just like not necessarily said anything or did anything, but like just being there kind of. And as we had our moments, by the end of it, we would all eventually calm down and stop screaming.
Eventually, yeah. I'm glad you say it that way because what I remember of it is there was literally nothing I could do. Like I couldn't do bedtime differently to make it better. I couldn't do a sticker chart. I couldn't use consequences. None of it worked. And so I really just had to sit there and make sure you were safe, but just sit there until you sort of expressed all of the big feelings that were happening in your little brain because you didn't know really what they were. I mean, it sounds like it was really like you needed something, but you didn't know what you needed. And then at the end of it, I remember you would always crawl in my lap and then go right to sleep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, when you were little, like it was big like that, like the meltdowns and the outbursts were a little bit bigger. And now we're able to be like, hey, I can't talk about it right now, but I can help you later. And like, that's enough now. Or is it enough now to know that your need is getting met?
Yeah. I mean, now like with having grown up with everything that I did and, I ended up having severe anxiety from it, which is partially genetic, whatever. But I mean, with living as such an anxious person all the time, like there's never peace and quiet in my head, but just knowing that, okay, at some point I'll be able to talk about this and like, oh my God, do I have someone who's going to meet that now and who's going to be able to be there for me? And even when you're going through your own stuff, that I can have like a set time that I know that we'll be able to talk about it in.
And so you're talking about attachment, right? Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing and what I know, because I experienced it with you, is that you didn't always have a super secure attachment figure who you could count on, right? Yeah. Like that there was moments or times or environments in your life where you didn't have an adult that could meet a need or that could be a stable base for you. And so I would say now what I'm hearing you say is that you're learning to be able to trust that. Like, oh yeah, that person will always be here. And what I have to do as a mom is I have to be really conscious of it because, you're 16, you're almost 17. You're almost an adult. Like theoretically, you should be, people think anyway, you should be like taking care of it on your own. But that's not true. That's not true for anybody. Is you need that attachment, that stable base to be able to be like, I've got you. And so what I have to do, and I don't always do it exactly right because nobody's perfect, is make sure that I'm always letting you know if I can't be always there, like when the next time is. that we can. And just for the people listening who might have teenagers, we don't spend a ton of time together. It might come across as like we're always together and hanging out, and that's not necessarily true. How would you describe how we spend time together?
I think that, there's like levels to it where I'd say, sometimes our spending time together for the day was just like at the end of the day, well, you're working and I'm just sitting on my phone in the living room together for an hour or two. Like that's what we spend time doing together for the day. Or there's like days where we'll go out to dinner or something. Or there's days where we literally don't see each other at all because of, the teenage lifestyle. So,
but there's always connection because we're texting or we're sending funny memes back and forth from Instagram. Yeah. And what I see anyway is that if you don't have those connection points, that's when sort of that dysregulation starts to happen. It's like when you don't have like that connection point. And so we're talking now about, well, we're moving into actually a little bit talking about rupture and repair. So I just did an episode on rupture and repair and how actually our attachment systems are built off of rupture, believe it or not. So like when there's a rupture, something goes wrong, a dysregulation happens, it's the repair that helps strengthen it. And so full disclosure, we have a whole lot of ruptures often. Fair? Fair. For a variety of reasons, but in part because you're a teenager and you're trying to learn how to be your own person. And so my job as a parent is to set a boundary, and like your job is not to like the boundary I set or the expectation I set or whatever it might be. And let's talk about how we do that, because I think that one took me a long time to figure out with you.
Yeah.
And it's still horrible when it happens, but I feel like, how does the repair happen? How do you see the repair happen? Like when we get in a tiff about something?
Yeah, I think, after some space, typically, like usually I'll, go to my room or I'll go out and do something with a friend for a little while, or depending on what it was. There's typically, I'd say, always like some space, and then that usually gives time for both of us to like decompress a little bit. And feel like typically in our relationship specifically, when we come back, we kind of come to a compromise on some things, at least anyways, depending on what it is. So there's a little give and take to everything. And there's, we tend to come up with a lot of solutions and like meet in the middles versus like, this is the only way and whatever.
And how does that meet in the middle happen? So when we're in it, let's say, I'm just going to give a silly example that's not real. Let's say I say, you may not have any more, I don't know, McDonald's all week. And let's say you're like, no, I want McDonald's every day, which, isn't real. It's just an example. When we're in it, are we able to do that problem solving together?
No.
Never.
So, yeah, no.
Mm-mm. And so what I find I have to do, which took me a long time to figure out, is I have to just stop talking, because you necessarily won't just stop talking.
Yeah, I will go at it till my point is made and heard. But that stems from a lot, though.
There's good reasons.
Child,
why you do it, right? So there's really good reasons why you do it, and it's not super functional. And so me as a parent, if I also made my point, which I tried to do for a long time, we would have some really, really big ruptures. Like they'd be big. Yeah. And so I had to learn to just stop talking and to say something like, Anna, we'll talk about this later. Or Anna, I'm going to go take a break. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens when I do that?
Tends to really make me mad. When it's me who walks away, then I'm like, okay, you know what? Fine. Like I'm going to just go to my room, or I'm going to go whatever. I just can't deal with this. I'd say that when you walk away, typically it's not like that's the end of it, but it leaves me very upset. Like I'll feel like she's being unreasonable, like I feel not heard and whatever. So a lot of the time, even after some space, it's still like, yeah, I've like regulated, calmed down a bit, but it's also still, I'm frustrated that like sometimes I still feel not necessarily heard from my standpoint of whatever the situation might be.
And that's that, like as a parent, so the parents listening, like that's that practicing your own distress tolerance that I have to calm. I have to know that you're not in a great place, but for me to jump in and say, sure, you can have McDonald's every day isn't going to solve any problems. And so I'm going to have to manage the fact that you are really ticked off at me, like real mad at me about something that I'm setting a boundary about, a normal parenting boundary. Like, no, you can't have McDonald's every day. And then what happens? So we take our little space, and sometimes we've taken like days of space for some bigger stuff. Then what?
Typically there's one person, I'd say, for the bigger stuff especially, like one of us will reach out, and typically the one who had done a thing, or like the conflict stemmed from whatever one of us like had said or did, I'd say, and then reaches out and typically is like, let's maybe get dinner, or like let's do something together that allows for a good time where we can kind of like talk about it and be like, okay, I'm sorry that, this didn't feel right to you or whatever, and kind of like acknowledge how it made the other one feel, while also still being like, but, this still really affected me. And that, I feel like, gives us a bridge to kind of come together and compromise, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. And to be clear, when we take space, like we're still communicating, because I'm still your mom and I'm still caring for you, right? So I'm really clear about that I'm still checking in about if you need a ride or what you want for dinner, or like you still know that I'm here. Right. It's just we both know that we need to regulate ourselves before we talk about said issue, right? Yeah. I want to ask, because when you're a parent, you see sort of behavior that your kids are doing, right? So we talked about when you were little, you might have big old meltdowns, or now when you might stomp up the stairs and slam the door or whatever, which really doesn't happen anymore, but it did for a moment. What do you want parents to know that their kids need?
I'd say, it really varies on the kid. For me and kids who are more so on that really anxious side, sometimes actually feeding into the anxious thoughts makes it worse, and it makes us spiral more. So I definitely would say, if you have a really anxious kid and like there's a lot happening and you're not in like a regulated state and you're trying to talk to them, like honestly can make things worse. Or to just like up in the air say, I don't know, I don't have time for it. That just really feels dismissive. And then it kind of like, okay, my needs aren't being met by this person, or this person isn't a safe person to talk to about things. So sometimes that little decompression space, like we can talk about it in an hour, or we can talk about it tonight or something like that. Unless, if you're in a regulated state, and then can kind of help bring that kid down, I'd say. But just knowing that you're there for your kid, even if it's not necessarily in the moment, but like really reaffirming like specifics, I'd say. And just for like those anxious like, kids especially.
So I hear you say that showing up as a parent regulated is really important.
Yeah.
And then if you're not able to be regulated, being pretty transparent about it so that the child knows that you're still there, that you're not going anywhere, that you're not dismissing them.
Right. And that's not them who's the problem, who's making you like unregulated, but like you have stuff going on too in your life that is affecting your current
ability to like be there for your kiddo in that moment.
For your kid.
I also wanted to ask, what do you think is the most important thing you wish parents knew about helping kids when they're mad, upset, or dysregulated?
I would definitely say, after growing up and having very many different parenting styles, like having gone through many different like styles of parenting, I should say, just really being attentive, like trying to stay in the moment with your kids when that's happening. Being relatable also seems, for me at least, to like really help, knowing that like, okay, I'm not the only one who has gone through, said situation, or who've had these big feelings before, and just still like making it where it's like feeling accepted for like, okay, I understand this is happening, in the moment, it's not the right time to be like, you shouldn't do X, Y, and Z, because that just like makes it worse and amps it up, and it damages your relationship with your kid, I definitely say. But being able to be relatable and understanding of the situation tends to help, I feel like de-escalate it a lot quicker. And then it leaves a healthy relationship to come back and be like, okay, so in the future, maybe instead of doing, whatever they did, and then just like replace it with next time, maybe try, and then insert something that you would suggest trying instead. But like just, well, the kids having like big feelings and just kind of like beating it into like, a whole different thing of what not to do.
Just be there for your kid and accept what they're showing you and see them for who they are.
Yeah.
It's lovely advice. All right. I think I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you so much, kiddo.
Yeah, of course.
If you like what you heard today, check out our Empowered Parent Coaching course offered through Thriving Parents Collective. In this course, you will get videos and course content to help you learn and develop the strategies you seek to meet your child right where they're at. Go to the show notes for the link. Where They're Planted is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Jen Bluske. Music is by Gaston Reen and Pod 5. Thank you for loving your child right where they're planted.